Hello, everybody. Welcome to our webinar. I'm just waiting a bit for everybody to join. So you guys comment on the chat if you are hearing us properly. My name is Rui. I'm going to be the host from Landing.Jobs sites. And today's webinar is about building a AAA video game. And here with us, we have Alexis Joly de Châtel. I said it correctly,
Yeah, that's
Alexis.
amazing. That's really good.
Yeah. Alexis comes from TLM Partners, Three Little Monsters.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a fun fact. I only discovered this some hours ago. I had no idea what TLM stands
yeah,
for
yeah,
for ages. And I mean, Alexis, many of you already know, is the head of creative at TLM, and is responsible, or at least had his finger in many games that most of you, or at least many of you, played. And I'm sure this will going to be a very interesting talk we have ahead of us. So, guys, I will ask one thing. So we have a ask a question section there. So you guys, through the presentation, go there, leave your question. At the end, I will be asking those questions to Alexis. Alexis will answer them, and
probably.
probably, yeah. I mean, be
I will.
careful
I
with the
will. I always.
questions.
I
Not
always
every
answer.
question, but
That's what I tell my wife. It's like
yeah.
I don't speak a lot, but if you ask a question, I will answer. So
Yeah. So you guys, I mean, you can ask every anything to.
yeah,
It's an AMI, right?
exactly.
Yeah. So Alexis, I think that many people are joining right now. If you only joined us now, Alexis is here. He's gonna talk. So maybe we'll tackle this already. Okay. So Alexis, are you ready to take the stage? Make it
Absolutely.
yours.
Of course.
Okay. So go ahead.
Thanks,
Thank
man.
you.
All right. So thanks everyone for coming in. Just a quick word on how we're going to spend the time together today. I'm going to tell you very quickly about who I am, where I come from, why I'm here. I'm going to tell you a bit about TLM Partners, the Three Little Monsters. I want to talk to you about. I want to talk to you about the gaming industry. Really, I know we talk about building a AAA game, and that's something that I think we should talk about. But especially looking at what that means today, because so. And then at the end, I'll make sure that we keep. I want to make sure we have some time for questions. So by all means, just I was kidding before, but make sure you log every question you might have about the game industry, about positions in the game industry, about specifically what we do with TLM or not, about what I did before. Like, I don't care. Let's just ask everything and we can. I know there's a lot of people here. It's hard on the screen, it's COVID and, whatever. But I want to make sure that we keep some time to talk about these things. So to start off, I've been in games for a bit over 15 years. I was lucky enough to be born in Montreal here in Quebec, Canada. The reason why I say this is not so much about the city itself, which is amazing, but more about that. Without knowing, I was born into a city that would become like they call it like the Hollywood of games or whatever. Like for many different reasons, it was a lot of like the government helping, giving tax credits to companies like 20 plus something years ago, the birth of 3D imagery, Image and stuff like that. So there was a lot of help. I guess Montreal is a weird mix of the American culture and the European culture. I'm myself French born, as you can probably guess by my name. Um, by the way, that was awesome. My name was pronounced actually very close to the truth. People in the studio call me AJD because I don't ask them to try to say my name properly. So I was born in this city. Eventually, I joined Ubisoft. At the time, it was a studio of 500 something. It wasn't doing AAA already, not quite. It was a fledgling business coming from the five from the Guillemot brothers, right from France. But they were very interested in establishing a strong presence here. 500 at the time was already a big studio. Now it's over, I think, 3,500 or whatever it is. And I was at UB for 13 years, working in design, so as a game designer. Um, that which led me to lead and director's position on different projects. Some of them AAA, some of them not AAA. Thankfully, I did also some smaller or weirder projects, even here in Montreal. Eventually, even discovering VR through the Funhouse initiative in 2015, I think it was. But also through that journey, I got really, really, really interested in the design process as a whole. So I'm not going to go on and I mean, I won't spend half an hour talking about design specifically here. That's not the point. But just to say, and I'll come back to this, it's actually quite important um, because, and as a parenthesis, if you think of it, and I'm sure there's people here that have studied or are studying or are working that haven't studied in video games specifically, and I'm sure you come from like fields of like engineers and artists and designers and managers and whatnot. But if you think of it, game design specifically and level design also is actually about the only field that doesn't exist outside of video games with its current skill set, right? Engineers come in, they learn, they might do like computer studies, they might learn to program like in machines to slice ham, or whatever it is. Like if they know how to code and they're interested enough, they can get into games. The same for 2D artists, 3D artists. They work outside of the gaming industry. They have for a while. But the designers, aside from when I was trying to explain to my mom what I do, and I would tell her, that board game. When you open up a board game, there's a rule. There's some rules in there. That's what I do. I write rules. Of course, that's not exactly what the job is, but I was really trying to have her understand, and she never really did. But anyways, if you think of it outside of gaming, this position doesn't exist, this job doesn't exist, and up to pretty recently, there were no strong formal studies in game design specifically. So game designers were coming from all the different fields, right? You need to imagine, like, I had a guy on my team who was graduated and he was a marine biologist. Why he studied that, I mean, I'm not quite sure. Why he came in games instead of looking after whales, I know even less. But the point is that at a time, that was the designers you would get. You would get people from history studies, like comparative literature, cinema, etc. It didn't matter much. But there was for sure a long period where we wondered about how can we make designers professional. If and that's a word that designers don't like, believe me. So if you think of it, but you go back to those years, specifically in Ubisoft, and it's interesting. I can speak of Ubisoft being there myself, but if you look at the industry, the same thing was happening um, at all the other majors. Okay, so it was a similar curve in the industry at the time. We were pouring more and more money into games. Gaming was becoming a pretty serious business. The consoles really democratized gaming even furthermore, right? And I'm thinking back even to the era, I was mentioning this previously, to the era of the PS2 with its 100 million plus install base, which is, at the time, it was like the potential of it was like you know mind blowing. Like if you did a good game and you could sell to 10% of that market, you would sell 10 million units. And that was like, so the budgets got really, really high. Everyone got really good. Everything progressed, and the designers were still doing designing by ear, or designing, thinking of whales, or of Russian literature, or whatever it was. Um, and so there was a big push at the time to really try to professionalize. And so I guess that's the first thing. If you think of what it means to build a AAA game, um, and what that entails, what it used to and now, there's a few interesting questions to ask yourself. So first, I wanted to quickly brush on the notion of AAA in itself. Is and you can actually answer in the chat field that I can see here. What do you feel is a definition of a AAA game? What makes a AAA game? I'm really curious to see what kind of answers you guys can pull up. Hey, Victor, I'll give you a moment to type in. What do you think makes a AAA game? Ugh. Are you guys Googling? What's going on? No one has sort of a feeling or an impression. What is a AAA game? Or Okay, high budget. Thank you, Tao, for the answer. Maybe high budget, big budget, presence, mainstream, shop shelves. Interesting. I guess it's trickling in. Yeah, cutting edge engine. Okay, maybe marketing. There you go. There you go. Something like that. Okay. All right. Now it's coming in. Canonical narrative. Interesting. High production value. The hype around the game. So I guess by now you can notice that if you look at the answers here, you're all right. Yeah, what is a triple A game? That's a good question. Exactly. You're all right and you're also all wrong, I guess. Is there a single definition of what the triple A game is? Because you're going to hear this all the time. And some of the big games that you like are probably triple A games, maybe not. Okay. So traditionally speaking, a triple A game is like you got to think of it as meat. Some people see activate Google mode. Some people think it's like meat, like AAA quality meat, and people think, oh, it's quality. But if that was the case, how do you even measure that? What is like where do you lose an A? Is it like the Michelin stars like for a restaurant, or like someone tastes it and go like two A's and a half? No. So traditionally, it's actually just the number of units sold. Okay, so it's like I guess it's the same difference between in cinema you would say like blockbuster, and then the other ones don't have a name. It's like either you're a blockbuster or you're not, and it's usually based on the sales you make, right? So of course the problem is this. Okay, so let's say you're a studio, you want to do AAA gaming, you want to sell a lot of units. That's your goal. Let's look at what was it, February, January, I forget, the release of Valheim. Let's talk about Valheim for a second, right? Valheim. If you guys probably know what it is. If you don't, just go ahead and spend whatever it is, $30 and buy and play that. Valheim is this super indie game made by 5 dudes in their own basements and like mostly over remote work, and they build this survivor game about Vikings and whatever. The game is up to 7 million units sold around now. It sells for $25 or so, whatever. I'm not sure what their budget was, meaning it's these or Binding of Isaac. There's many other examples, of course. But I'm just using Valheim because it's everywhere. It's in the news. 7 million units sold. So it's a quadruple A almost now, and it's like the most indie, low budget thing you could think of. So I I guess, and then of course you have Assassin's Creed, and whatever, Destiny once in a while back, or Call of Duty. Some of these games that are moving 10, 12, 15 million units across all machines. So these are triple A's for sure. But so the problem is this: as a studio, if you decide to pursue triple A gaming, what does it mean? And then some of you guys actually provided part of that answer is, how do you reach that million units sold? And there's a few ways to do this. Of course, you could just buy your way in, right? I mean, you see this a lot. If I have a stronger, someone said marketing, big budget, maybe not, depends on the game again, but marketing budget, of course. If you put 20, 30, 50 million dollars in marketing, um, it's, I mean, with the market nowadays, it's almost a guarantee you're going to hit that million unit, just because you're gonna spread it so wide, so far, that even people that don't read the websites, they don't read the reviews, they don't go on Kotaku or whatever, you're gonna end up selling a bunch of those. Is it retail presence that was mentioned? It's actually interesting because it's linked to that marketing, right? We used to bargain with with like the Targets, Walmart, like whoever. We used to bargain with them. How much square footage of shelving can we get for a specific game? So we would go there, we would demo the game to them. They would look at their numbers and they would go like, okay, we're gonna buy 400,000 units, like pre-purchase. They would pre-order 500,000 units. They would put it on the shelves, and then they would see how it sells. So it was always a question of how much money you can push and how far can you push it. But the reality is this: if you look at, yeah, that's interesting. If you look at a game like Cyberpunk, I don't know if a lot of you got in the Cyberpunk game. I know I did. I was there day one. I'm a big fan. Cyberpunk had a budget of around $250 million, or so they say. It might be a bit more than that. And they were running. Keep in mind also on a studio where the wages were good, but they were not necessarily as high than what you would spend if you were building this in California, for example, right? But that's like that was one of the biggest we've had so far. And and even with all the shit show of the release, so all the bad press, all the issues they had on the old consoles, regardless of all of that and the refunds and the fact that they got blocked off the stores, there's still are technically blocked off the PlayStation Store, right? Regardless of all that, they sold whatever a, a few bazillion million copies, and they're still like highly profitable. And some people can criticize that it's unfortunate because they did a bad job, but they still got off with a lot of sales, etc. Um, yeah, there's a overhyping, right, Rui? That's a good point, overhyping. But so you can also, yeah, that's so some of these are cases where you say if you put a big enough budget in, um, you can get into AAA. You can try to get into AAA. You still have to do the game, don't mind you. I'm still talking about the business here, but that's still part of it. But then of course everyone wishes for the Valheim side of things too, which is saying how do we give ourselves space to perhaps make discoveries along the way that could turn into AAA sales for a game that doesn't look like a AAA. People wouldn't call it AAA, but it's just selling 7 million units so far with Five Guys. Like they got asked by people, "Do you gonna do a version on Mac?" I don't know if you guys saw this at some point. I thought it was hilarious. Are you gonna do a Mac version? And their official answer was, "We don't own a Mac, so we cannot create and compile the game for Apple systems." Which I thought was amazing. When they said that they already had a few million sales in, but they didn't have a Mac, and that was the end of it. Um, so there was this big question initially on and even 10 or 15 years back, like building some of the bigger games inside Ubisoft. How do we keep on pushing for AAA? And that was because that was a mandate, that was the goal of the studio at the time. And it's not just, I guess, it's not just in terms of number of sales and units. It's also like how do you make the big games of tomorrow, or something like that. And so, like I said, the initial answer was putting more money, like bigger games, bigger scope, bigger teams, bigger everything. But the one of the issues is how do you guarantee that you're going to sell, that people are going to come? Because I mentioned before, you may try to force it down, you may try to buy some seats with the marketing and whatnot. But if you want to do a series, and you've seen this actually happen to Assassin's Creed at some point, if you build a series, the trick that you use initially to maybe spread it around, get people excited, overhyped, maybe everyone buys it, and then how long will you need to recover from a failure, right? In the case of Cyberpunk, people argue, well, by the time we see their next game, yeah, 350 bills, what you need to recover from that. Yes, that's true. Uh, People think, well, by the time they put out their next game, which are, whatever, or Cyberpunk, something else, people are gonna, they will have forgotten. We're gonna get excited all over again, etc. So that's, but maybe not. I don't know. Who knows? People used to say CD Projekt Red is a great developer because the gamers they like the studio. But I'm not sure that matters that much anymore, because out of the 15 million units they sold or whatever, like a very small percentage of these people actually pay attention to the media, even if it was all over the place. Like not everyone is passionate about the industry or reads the news. Like it still got out, it still got on the TV, it looked amazing, people bought it. But there was, like I was saying, there was always this worry that it's not enough, like we're gonna burn ourselves. And we had this conversation, it was a very unpleasant conversation a few times on the Assassin's Creed brand some years back, because as you know, AC was annualized and like systemically every year something would come out. So it meant that there were always between 2 and 3 teams working on a game at the same time, and they were basically staggered in time. So you have these guys are going to come up next, and then we're going to come up the year after, and then these guys are going to come up in 2 years, but everyone is running at the same time. And the issue is that how much time do you have to actually improve or fix anything if by the time these guys ship, there's a point where you got to take everything new they have done, you take it, but there's a moment where you need to stop because you need to stabilize and create your own stuff. So these guys are going to run along, they're going to keep on creating new stuff, and then you're going to have these diverging parallel realities occurring where this game comes out, and let's say for example they change something important in the combat system, but these guys decided to take everything but not everything, they left some of the pieces behind, or maybe when they branched it wasn't done, and so they do their own game which has I don't know, like new horses, but they didn't use the new combat stuff. So this new game comes out, everyone's like, oh, new combat is amazing, well done. And then a year later this other one comes out and it doesn't have the new combat stuff, it has new horses, and then people are like, what? I mean, we had, you guys did an amazing job fixing the combat last year, and now we're getting this other version with a crappy, crappy combat and then the new horses. So you see what I'm saying? Is that so we had this issue, and then you can pile up people, and we piled up people. Like we went all the way up. You want to talk about AAA? That this was like retarded version. It's still pretty much the same, but like we went up 900 people, 1,000 people working on a single game, and you have to do this in sourcing, right? So you have to spread it out to all the different studios because even the Montreal studio wasn't big enough to hold like a 900 people team. So they would say, okay, the core team is here, it's 500 people, 400 people, and then we're going to leverage all the other studios, all the other internal studios. So it was not work for hire, to ramp up, and like just copy paste, and just like we call it the sausage machine, and we try to produce as all the content that we want. But then try to imagine, how do you guarantee the control and the level of quality and the level of love that you want in your game when you have 900 people over 10 locations spreading, on all this, like with all the overhead. So you got to hire a bunch of people that all they do is coordinate with the other studios, and things like that. And I guess the question, and that's part of the reason why you'll see why I'm there's a tangent here. The question is, how sustainable is this? Because if you do this right, you're hunting for that unicorn, you're building this game, you crank up the team because you're like, we have a fixed date. There was a decision, because of the annualized strategy, which is, there's different ways to do it, but it's one way. We got to hit that date. We got to hit a certain quality. So the only leverage we have is to pull more bodies on top. Okay, so you do that. So then your costs explode. And every time you do this, you're like, well, we can guarantee, whatever, 10 million units, maybe. But the costs keep increasing. So we have to sell more. And then you hit this problem of like, okay, where do we sell more? How? Like, who do we sell more of this to? Because like we're pushing on every market as much as we can. Like it's not like we let this whole market on purpose to the side. Like we're trying to do pretty much as we can everywhere all the time. So how do you make 2, 3, 4 million units more out of thin air, right? Just because you need it. That's 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 not sustainable. And like, yeah, like it's mentioned, the costs just keep increasing as well. So let alone the problem of the I guess the race to the race to the bigger game, the race to the better game, which is good, but it means that you're always pushing more. This is, I think that's the cyberpunk story right there, right? They knew what they were doing. They had like a bazillion dreams. They were pushing. They pushed really hard. They pushed on everything. Should have they pushed on every machine? Maybe not. Maybe they should have waited to do like old gen, right? But they said no because we got to sell those units, and the new gen doesn't have enough machines sitting around in the houses. We got to sell on PS4. We got to sell on the old Xbox because we need to hit that install base. But the dream they're pushing, it was not really that compatible, not that much with the old machines, or they needed more time, or whatever it was, right? You see, so there's a big game of mathematics going behind, and that I believe it's not sustainable. And we talked about this a few years ago, um, which was how do you make it more sustainable? Where do you grow from? And is absolute growth the idea? Because that's also something you could question, like how, like it's like the what's his name, Sisyph, pushing the boulder. Like how high can you push the boulder because before it's too much and it crushes you and brings you back down the mountain, and then you got to start again. Is there a point where you should maybe stop pushing in that sense, right? So a lot of questions around that. And then so it's essentially what we've been noticing for a few years now, because these questions I'm asking, I'm obviously not the only one. Absolutely not. And I usually don't care so much about the business side of things, but with time, by the effort of doing games and trying a few different companies, you got to start getting interested in that. Even if you're a designer or creative, you got to understand how the industry works. There has been a bit of a breach. So you will see some of these efforts, like Cyberpunk, like Call of Duty or whatever, continue. But you see some of the other examples, and I want to mention something like Fortnite. I think it's important to mention as an example again, if only because it's a living lab, and it's a live service, live game model, um, where it started. It started didn't start as much, obviously. It was even like this, this canceled mode into something else, and it was very clunky, and it fit with the brand itself, so it wasn't a big issue. It was gameplay first. It was a bit like, it wasn't taking itself too seriously. But if you think of it, it was what was it? It was systemic first. It was online, and it was and therefore it was a live offering. It was a live product that could be expanded, controlled, redirected. It was a big lab, right? And you've seen a lot of these games. I'm mentioning Fortnite just because now it seems like it's this industry standard of how the big money can roll on something that is technically not a triple A. It never really felt like, but it's made billions, like billions and billions, right? So it's like the biggest of triple A's probably. But they found a different route to sustainability, and they found a different route to and I guess that's important, keeping their dream alive, because they had a dream and they wanted to try something, and they found a way to make that happen. And so I guess for a lot of us, that question that question was really important. Like before I left Ubisoft, I worked, like I mentioned quickly, I worked on in the fun house. I worked on like these, it was like more like a experimental unit with like smaller games, things like Child of Light was the initial game that spawned the fun house. And then we did some VR stuff with Eagle Flight and VR, and transference and stuff like that. And it was a way, like an indirect way for even a big studio to question itself on, is there like what else can we do, and can we learn anything from trying different routes, even though in the end I think you still pretty much maintaining its DNA of what they want to do. But if you look at the market, then and the difference, even here in the city, there's over 70 studios in Montreal, and of course, like most of them don't do AAA gaming, or I mean, they don't do these big budget games, I mean. But then how do you do it? So I think there's a whole field that needs to be mentioned, that for me was a big discovery. It was an amazing discovery, and I'm not even done. I'm not even remotely done. Is a psychology, player psychology. And I meant, because of course, okay, everything that was said in the chat, and a lot of the stuff I mentioned is market related. And most of the times you don't control, if you work in games, regardless of the studio you work for, or with, you probably won't have much control over the financials very often, or the marketing strategy, or whatever it is. If you're, especially if you're a creator of or a developer of some sort. Um, but but yeah, so basically psychology, and I guess the user, and this is going to sound super obvious, but believe me, it was not for the longest time, and I think a lot of people still don't realize this in gaming, is that video gaming in itself is a unique medium. It's a unique proposition in the landscape of human endeavors. Okay, I want to say, because it and it was very, for a very long time, it was always compared to film. And you would see, and you would see a lot of this. You would see studios with creatives that had frustrated dreams of Hollywood or working in films, and it didn't work out. Something happened, and they ended up coming in games, thinking, well, I'm going to treat gaming like we treat cinema. And in their mind, there was this whole noble approach of saying gaming is treated like this toy, or this kids play, and cinema is such a noble and pure form of art. And in their mind, it was like we always got compared, and always, even they even try to use the same techniques, and what have you, and it doesn't work. And it doesn't work a lot. And I don't know if any of you recall playing certain games from a very popular Japanese franchise a while back, where you would sit and you would be waiting for the moment where you can play, and you'd be watching through, like, very interesting but long, and very, like, a lot of cinematics and cutscenes, and some of those still exist, and they're a worthy pursuit in their own rights. But for sure, the medium is a lot more than that, and people came to realize this over time. They're a lot more, and if only for one thing, which is making everyone's life complicated. It's interactive. You don't actually control the narrative so much. You can tell a story, you can impose it on the gamer, the player, the user, but you don't actually control it. And I always give the same example, which I love, um, is you create. We talk about, like, environmental storytelling. That's a buzzword, right? You create a world. Open worlds especially do this, and you put narrative in the world. You create a story. This guy is sitting on a bench, and there's this poster, and we like to think of this as scenes, set pieces. You come in the village, and then the village tells a story. And of course we do this. We have to do this, and and we need to make it credible and relevant, and etc. But the example I use is, how do you control, or how do you manage the user that comes in jumping? And I know you guys know who you are. You guys recognize yourself. You you beasts. You only go around game constantly jumping just because you can. What do you think that looks like? So where do you even look? What do you even look at? And so you can see this image, and that's what I tell these people that want to have a very tight control over some of the narrative stuff during the game. I'm like, yeah, this guy is going to come in your serious set piece with the village, and he's going to come in with, like, his pink gun, because we sold him a ridiculous pink skin, and he's going to come in like hip, whoop, hip, whoop, whoop, hip, whoop, hip, whoop. He's gonna jump across your super intense set piece, Kurosawa, scene, and that's what it's going to look like. And a lot of the games we do, that's how they're played, or not, or the guy is running backwards, or the guy actually was running 20 feet outside the village because he followed the squirrel, because we put a credible squirrel system in the forest. And then he was running after that, and then he came in the village between two buildings. You didn't see the guy on the bench, and then he went straight to the shop, and then, yeah, he skip, and then he was off after another squirrel, right? Maybe that's the game. And so there's a lot of questions to unpack from something like this, which is, do you care? Should you mine? If you do, how do you prevent it? Should you prevent it? Should you offer, like, how? So you see, that's why I was talking about the player psychology, is because ultimately, all these things have been studied, and all these things have been tested in other games or in things that have nothing to do with games, right? So then we started. There was a long process for me. It was about 10 years ago. Yeah, we're seriously, and we had initiatives at the time at UB, and we started looking at gathering all the stuff we could from the other fields. And I will tell you this, and you might know this from your own position or not. The gaming industry is very bad at working with others. Very bad. I'm not sure why. There's like we could go on a long time about this, but either we don't like, or we believe, or yeah, I think it's like two ways, right? Cinema is like, well, gaming is bleh. And then people are gaming are like, well, these other guys don't understand what we do, and there's some of that. There's some ego. There's always a lot of ego in design. Then there's just or just like, we don't have time, right? Like I was talking about AC and their multiple running lines. Like, we don't, who has time to actually go to the university here and like spend like whatever 4 times 3 hours with a professor in something to understand a bit more. How does the eye perceive? Like, I'm not even kidding. This is something designers at some point, not just game designers, but designers do have to study this. How do you perceive? How does memory work? Right? We had a lot of a big push in the recent years about neuropsychology and just in neuro studies as a whole. It's like, this stuff is fascinating. That's like the core. That's a bread of butter. How does the brain work? And I know, like, it seems like we're like, isn't it too big of a of a curve to actually like pull all the way out and go, but how does the brain work? But you should, like, this should be part of the technical knowledge that the designer have, that creative people in the industry and as a whole, I'm including coders, gameplay programmers, they have to understand all of this. How does the brain work? How do you perceive information? How do you memorize stuff? The memory is fascinating. Like, you've all gone through like these big games or AAA games or open world. You come back, after 2 weeks, there are some really high chances that you will stop and you will never come back again. We've seen it. We've seen the tracking. People go like boop boop boop. They log. They have a bit of a break. And they try again. Nope, never come back. And people say, "Oh well, they lost interest." Really? Is that what's happening? I'm not sure. And then we need so we need other angles to study this. Oh well, no. You know what? It's because by the time they were really far into the game, and then they left because they wanted to do something else. They come back, and now they're expected to remember everything at the highest level of mastery of what we expect from these people. And they come back and they don't remember, like, they don't really know, they probably don't even remember the mapping on the controller, but they're supposed to be 200 hours in, right? And so that's just one tiny example of cases where we go like, oh, it wasn't an issue with interest at all. Maybe they came back, so they came back because they were like, oh, I want to see, what else is in the game. And then, fuck this shit, and then, they quit. um so all these fields need to be studied. And so the point is this: we started pushing for this because of a AAA mentality, AAA investment, AAA desires. And we said we need to be reliable. We need to, like, be more accurate. You see what I mean? It's like, I often use this comparison between like a pro athlete and your cousin who's really good at something, right? Pro athletes, like, their best day is here and their worst day is here. And your cousin is here, and sometimes, like, this one time he got up to here for some reason, and it was really exciting, and he felt like, I could go pro. Well, maybe he could, right? But so, what's the difference between the two? It's the how reliable are the results. And it's true for every performance. It's true for musicians. I believe it's true for designers, industrial designers, architects, game designers, whatever. It's like, if you're technical and if you're trained, then you become reliable. So it means that even on a bad day, working on a game you don't like, under, maybe there's some stress, maybe you had to do like a lot of hours, like who knows what happened. How reliable are you on your worst day? It's like, this is pretty important question. It's for everything we do in life, right? Um, and it was especially true because of the AAA involvement. But if you think of it now, what we try to do, and I'll quickly, just very quickly talk about this, and why I'm at TLM today. You probably haven't heard the name. The company hasn't been there for a long time, and it's changed. Like, we went from 20 people a year ago, we're over like 130 now, and we onboarded a lot of veterans and people like me that just, maybe they felt like they wanted to try something different or do it differently. Um, so we have people that worked at EA, Take Two, Activision, like, on all the big games, the big brands, whatever. But and we started by saying, well, we're going to publish, so we're going to work. We have this technological thing that's really important for us, which is crossplay. And by the way, I was talking about sustainability before, and using the Fortnite example is a good one. Is crossplay is a critical way to become AAA, even if your game is not necessarily a big, like a AAA game, because people want to play together and they want to play seamlessly from any of their machines, right? So that's a predicate that we base the company on. And then we said, well, we're going to self-publish at some point. So we publish games. We do work for hires for some of the bigger games, some people we know, because it's good business. Everybody gets their chance to touch, Call of Duty titles, some of the bigger titles, some of the stuff I'm not going to talk about, but some big productions that we can help. And that's, straight up work for hire. It's good for training, it's good for contacts and whatnot. Publishing is important. um, we want to be able to publish super small titles, medium titles. Like, every time, what we do is, imagine you put the title here, and it's this reliability question comes back. Developer comes in, they have a game, it's cool, has potential, we like it, but maybe they're not reliable as individuals or as a team. Maybe they're very junior. Maybe they didn't have a lot of budget. Maybe they didn't have a lot of time to work on it. And what we try to do is say, okay, come in. And then we have like this whole array of services, if you will, right? Where we're going to be able to provide UI, UX, we're going to review cinematics if we need to. The music, like whatever it is, we have experts that can come in, help you patch the game a bit. Then we put the crossplay on top of it and we send it out across all the machines. And maybe, it's a small game, maybe it sells for a 9.99 or 20 or 40, like whatever it is, doesn't matter. We can try to maximize, we want to maximize the potential of a game by having this reliable, like this, basically this rational approach, right? That's my big thing. The rational conception approach, rational publishing, that goes with it, and then having this high potential spread on all the machines. That's what we want to try. And then we also work on, constant growth, because we want to self-publish. So we're going to start, working on internal games. And again, always with this idea, like, I want to do a triple A game in the sense that I want the game to sell well, and I want the game to feel important for people playing it. Like Valheim, coming back to that example, feels important. And of course, it's great because you pay $25 and then you get this amazing value out of it, right? For someone playing it, you go like, I'm so happy for this game. I'm happy for these guys. I'm happy I paid $25. This is amazing. I'm having fun. Like, it has great value for everyone. And for me, that's the real vision of AAA gaming, is a high value for everyone involved. People working on it think it's, fuck, they just sold 7 million copies. They will buy, believe me, they're going to buy a pretty powerful Apple computers if it's not done already. They bought a horse, I saw in the news. They bought a horse and gave it to the horse school. I don't, anyway, I don't know. Norwegian people, like, who knows? Um, I'm kidding, of course. I love them. But so it's all about value, and generating the value for people working on it, people putting it out, and ultimately the users. Because again, like, and for designers, this is critical. We do all of this for the users first, and then maybe if you're lucky, your work is important, or it's remembered or whatever. If you look for fame in history, maybe you'll have it. But really, it's about experience, right? If you a playtime and I'm going to stop soon. Playtime is a very interesting thing. People say, oh, AAA is about playtime nowadays, right? If you don't have enough play, that was a very famous journalist question. Every time we presented a game, we would get the question, what's the expected playtime? As if you would be judged on it, right? And I hated that question. We tried to dodge it, answer sideways for years and years. Doesn't really work. Every time you have to repeat whatever the answer is. 8 hours, it's 40 hours plus, as long as you like whatever the answer is, you always have to justify yourself and explain it. Like, it's about value. If you pay 60 bucks, you come in for the best 12 hours of your life, I don't see a problem. And the player won't see a problem either. But justifying that the economics is hard. So maybe you say, well, it's 8 hours campaign, but it has a multiplayer, so if you've seen all these all the different answers through time in the media. But yeah, because basically people think that's where the value is, so they wonder about value. Everyone wants to know about value, and that's really the important thing. That's what we're trying to build. um I'm gonna stop here before I get excited and talk about other stuff. I want to make sure that we can have questions, because I promised I would answer, so I need at least a bit of time to make sure I do provide an answer if possible. And thanks for listening to me ramble for 40 minutes.
Oh, it was amazing, Alexis. I mean, I guess that people can say in the chat, but everybody was liking a lot. I identified myself in lots of those as a user in lots of things that you said. And I mean, we have 9 questions here at
Okay,
least. Let's
good.
try to address all of them. They might be
That's fine.
oversight. Yeah. In the meanwhile, don't forget that we have open positions at TLM. You have there a button, a call to action. I invite you to after the presentation to go check.
Yeah, and
So
actually,
yeah,
sorry, just
tell me,
because
tell me.
otherwise I'll
Hmm.
be a bad VP. I didn't say this specifically, but because I think it's really important. So we are set up as a cloud company. This is important because even though I'm here in Montreal in a city full of developers and some of my colleagues live nearby, TLM itself is a cloud studio. So we don't have offices, and we
Yeah.
don't care. We have people in like 18, 19 countries, and that's the way we set it up, and we really like that. So of course that's partly why I think it's important to talk with you guys. Okay, let's go.
So, moving to the questions. The first one is how someone coming from business app development, for example, a full stack web developer, can get into games development. Is it necessary to know how to design or model in 3D? Thanks. And there is also a feedback on this question saying, I am a web dev and starting doing some Unity game tutorials. Is that the best starting point? So, this is about
Okay.
starting into, yeah.
Yes, and it's very interesting. So very quickly, this is mostly true, but of course, depending on the studio, depending on the team, this what I'm going to say is going to vary. But very quickly, you got to imagine that a game development team is a. If you look at the pie, it's and, I'm going to draw it. I like drawing. Give me a second here. I like drawing pies. I like eating them a bit more. But okay, so yeah, you'll see. So everything, and these proportions are not good, by the way. I will tell you why. So the first part of the pie is design. Everything involving design: game design, level design, narrative design, music design, UI UX design. Okay, stuff. Art. Everything involving art. That's 2D art, 3D art. That includes animation, modeling, rigging, lighting, concept arting, 2D, 3D, matte painting, etc. Art. Then you have programmers, the coders, and this is all matters of engineers, and they specialize or they generalize. And there's a gazillion different programming fields in gaming, from engines to physics to rendering to networking to all this other stuff they talk to me about that I don't understand. And then in the middle, which is the glue, is the management pole, which is I'm strictly managers. To people that do business studies or management studies, producers, project managers, et cetera, et cetera. Of course, there's a lot of people in the actual fields that become, leads or team leads, or they become part manager, part developer. But we also have like proper managers that's all they do all day, and they're really good at it, and they need to just imagine this 900 people team I was mentioning before. The number of managers we had on that team was pretty staggering. So all this to say that regardless of where you come from, you don't need and you're not expected to know all of these things. So if you come from business, oh, and oh, yeah, pie. Okay, I'm gonna add the crust because otherwise otherwise I'm gonna hit my fingers hit the crust, the crust to the pie as an S for services. Um,
Okay.
Services is legal, HR, purchasing, in-game marketing, whatever else, other marketing, fulfilling of orders. Like there's like a gazillion jobs in services because depending on the business, depending on the product, you have to keep everything rolling, everything out. So you have people doing like even marketing itself has like three different types of marketing, and they operate very differently. You have PR, you have com, you have like I I used to say if you look at a big enough studio, probably every single job you can think of, almost every single field probably has an equivalent in games. And I'm including, by the way, historians. We talked about this before. A lot of these big games have historians on staff full time, which is crazy. But we need to like, who knows all the details and all the shit about everything we put in the game. So we need experts of every single topic. So if you come from business, there's something there. But it depends on what you want to do. If you want to
Hmm.
model, if you want to work in art, then you need to learn how to model. You need to learn, and there's different studies, different software, and like I said, there's a lot of different roles once you start exploding those buckets. But there's like hundreds of different actual like specific professions you can work in, and you need to be interested by everything, but you need to be good at something, right? So, and especially in design, I say this because designers are, if hopefully they're good at design, but they're usually interested by a bunch of useless stuff, right? We become, um, I call it specialist in generalities.
Yes.
Yeah, or
Exactly.
like or jack of all trades or whatever. But whatever it is you do, just be interested by everything so you understand the ecosystem, but try to become good at something you like, and that's how you start.
Yes, we have more questions
Yep.
regarding this. I will put them maybe to the end since they are very close to this
Okay.
one. We have another one. Will indie games end up being the guerrilla that defeats AAA army? Daniel here asking.
Okay.
An
Okay,
interesting
okay, okay,
one.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I love it. So I was tempted to just say yes and leave it at that, but so I'm looking for an image. I think I had the image. So if you have a fish tank, and bear with me for a second. If you have a fish tank at home, okay, you have this little tube, and you gotta put some air, right? You gotta put some bubbles in the fish tank, so there's oxygen in the water. Yeah.
Hmm.
So you got to think of it like this: AAA gaming, or big budget gaming is the pump that you buy, the machine that pushes the air in. And you need a very strong, very expensive pump so it can do like a really good job of pushing shit out. That's AAA gaming. You need
Yeah.
you need that because this is where there's always going to be a lot of focus and attention. There's all a fish, no fish tank drawing. Give me a second here, so I don't lose it. Okay, so
Well,
I'll do
we're
it quickly.
asking for the important questions right
No, 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 no,
now.
no, 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 exactly. Okay, so yeah, so you have a fish tank, and you have the machine. Okay, and that machine, and I'm doing quickly, like a really shitty job here. That machine is the AAA gaming is the pump. Okay, and now everything else is all the fishies in the tank. Look, fishies, and even I put in a plant. I put in a plant or two. There's a plant or two, and there's some fishies.
That's a
Okay,
perfect.
yes. So in order to get enough drive, and I will, if I was a bit more serious, I would use Hollywood as a very important lesson that I think was learned in gaming in the recent years. Hollywood was near extinction at some point as I mean, Hollywood is a blockbuster pushing machine, because at some point people were like, meh. And they even, it's like I was saying before, I sell 10 million units. I need to sell 15. Where are those 5 other million people? I'm not sure where they are. We've been trying, we've been pushing. How can I increase by 50% magic automagically? How does that happen? It doesn't happen. And Hollywood had this, they had this issue, and it was happening to their blockbusters. And they were saying, well, we need to ventilate. It's exactly what they said. I'm sure someone drew a fish tank in a meeting at Universal Studios or whatever. We
Yeah.
need to ventilate the industry. We need to find a way to have some of that effort and money and focus and some of that craftsmanship, professionalism circle back into the ecosystem. But
Hmm.
where do you learn best? Some people will say, well, you learn best by doing the hard job on one of the big studios. And I say hard job, sometimes these games they're hard to work on. They're amazing, but they're hard, sometimes really hard to work on.
Hmm.
Every game is anyways. But you go there, you learn the hard way, you do the hard stuff. You work with big teams like the army, you get trained, formally trained, you're out of the Marines, and then you go back and then you go in the fish tank, and then you're using that ventilation, because people will trickle out. People like me or like whoever, eventually, like they trickle out of the big studios. Anyways, it's just logic, because a lot of people come in. And then, can you keep everyone that has been 15 years in a studio? No, of course. At some point, like people have to trickle out of the machine. There's like the machine doesn't grow forever. People trickle out. They go create new studios. They go work for smaller studios, and they bring with them everything that they've done on some of the other places. Or even from a small studio to another small studio, it's still the same idea, right? So
Yeah.
you need that AAA gaming, because it's an engine. You need blockbusters, right? So it was
Hmm.
Sony Pictures created whatever it is, I forget their name, like Buena Vista Pictures or whatever, right? So they had the blockbuster studios, and they were using 10% of their money to fund the small Searchlight, whatever studios. And once in a
Hmm.
while, poof, you get an Oscar,
Yeah.
right? Because you give a guy 2 millions and a camera, and you say, yeah, whatever, you just go on and run. And he comes back in with an Oscar, and you go like, fuck. So you create a talent, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah. That's
it's the same thing in gaming, but we don't, it's not institutionalized so much, but that's the
okay.
natural way the ecosystem needs to ventilate, so it can be
Hmm.
feed itself back.
Okay.
That was a longer answer to yes. I could have said yes, but
I mean, the answer was really insightful. Thank you. We have another one here. Rui Oliver is asking, I read somewhere that No Man's Sky and Cyberpunk had a lot of pressure problem. Push, push, push. Martin was already too committed to allow time to fix problems. Is this a common problem?
yeah. Look, I mean, the stupid answer is, whenever there's money, you get that problem.
Hmm.
That's a stupid answer, because of course it's not always true, but it's very true. And yeah, and I was mentioning this whole, like, the cyberpunk push with their whole fiasco with the old gen is a perfect example of this. Do you think a single developer on that game wanted to do old gen? Of course not. Why?
Yeah.
Why would they? You tell them this is the future, and they see. Like, I played on PC, right? So I don't care. I have a powerful PC for work. I played on PC, zero problem. I was like, this is beautiful. This is amazing, and they know how great they can make it. And
Yeah.
then they have pressure to make a shitty version for a backward machine, because it's the timing was like, and that's a classical example of this. So you get a lot of that. I was mentioning AC before, and I didn't tell the conclusion of that story, but the game was annualized, right? And then
Hmm.
internally, at some point, there were discussions, rightfully, to say, hey, maybe
Yeah.
we should ventilate a bit the
Yeah.
franchise. we
Yeah.
need the, we need some air, guys, because we can't improve if we're always running the sausage machine. It's so hard. But how do you argue? And God knows I don't blame them. How do you argue with headquarters saying, look, we make
They need the money.
we
Yeah.
we make yearly $1 billion yearly, and you're telling me I need to skip a year? Yes, you need to skip a year.
Yeah, that's
And
a tough one
where
to
do we make that missing $1 billion? Are you going to make it on the next one? Are you telling me, are you promising me that if we give you 1 year, you're going to sell double on the one after? Well, no, of course not. We're going to sell the same, maybe a bit better.
yeah.
And that was a conversation for many years. Eventually, they did ventilate, and
Hmm.
it actually saved the franchise because they took their time for origins and whatnot, and they
Yeah.
skipped a year. They had a strong team that made a strong case, showing,
Hmm.
look, this is the stuff we're improving, guys. Come on, like, and but the fatigue was showing enough that the stakeholders said, yeah, okay, there's a good risk that this is going to go bad. Fine, take a year. But it was because I'm sorry, bluntly speaking, I don't like doing politics. It was because they were scared enough to make much less.
Yeah.
If they were convinced that it was still working on full blown, they would have just said no, keep on rolling. So
Yeah.
yeah, it is a reality, of course, business.
And the billion is a lot to gamble, especially
Ugh.
when you don't have a concrete answer, like a definite.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like we're just gonna forfeit this money. Yeah, sure, sounds great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have another question here. Going back to Fortnite, you said it made billions. However, it is a free game. If we consider games like Call of Duty, we pay almost $100 at launch date, and we're invited to buy a season pass, equipment, credits,
Oh, I
etc.
know, I
This
know.
feels a bit too much since I already did some kind of down payment. For AAA, is there a tendency to switch the way games are being sold versus free?
Yeah, that's considered. So that's actually, I love Call of Duty. I think it's the best example today for
Hmm.
business case study. It's the best example
Yeah.
because they're running actually both models at the same time
Hmm.
because they're tricky little bastards. So they're running the traditional single player almost yearly release,
Yeah, and
whatever, like
Warzone at the
big,
same. Yeah.
and Warzone at the same time. So they're saying, wait a minute, we have this amazing tech, and let's face it, you
Hmm.
may, if you play some of those battle royale game,
Yeah.
um, regardless of your preference, if you look at it, the reality is that Warzone, in terms of player experience, like what we call the 3Cs, right? Character,
Yeah.
control, camera,
Hmm.
is way more solid than something like PUBG. It
Yeah.
feels much better to control. And then
Hmm.
maybe and then maybe you like the meta or not, maybe you like whatever. But if you just play, because of course they were saying we're sitting on like 20 years of prime shooter expertise, and we're using this traditional model because it still works, but you can see that they're selling more shit. They're trying to, because it's not sustainable. We said this, it's
Yeah.
not sustainable. They know it. And they go like, wait a minute. So let's just take all of what we know, make a bit of a gamble, put a big team, put them on a battle royale, full on free to play, full on monetization with fucking crates and skins and shit, and like the whole thing, battle pass. And they're running both models at the same time. And I can tell you that whenever they decide, like whenever there's a risk with one of the two lines,
Hmm.
they're gonna be ready to go like, fuck it,
Yeah.
like this thing is like, or like we don't care, let's wait a few years before we do this thing again. And now let's keep on with this line that is working perfectly fine. So there is a profound will from the AAA studios to find the way. But finding the way, it's like I said before. If Let's imagine a conversation where I came back and said, let's do free to play AC with crates. They would have said the same thing, but we have $1 billion guarantee. How much are you going to do with your crates? I don't know yet.
Yeah.
Do you have a forecast? Yeah, I have a forecast, but I mean, it's not $1 billion. Okay, so why should we? It would be the same conversation. So it's like for some of
Yeah.
these big games, what's the risk in order to figure out? And then the thing has to be good, and then it has to do
Yeah. Of course.
everything else right that I was
Hmm.
mentioning, player psychology, everything technical, everything artistic. Like it has to hit all those boxes. So it's which is why, well, I mean, we know this, which is why the risk taking never comes from these vectors because
Yeah.
it's too high.
Yeah. I feel the same. I used to be a heavy FIFA player, and I felt that like every year it was the same thing, and sometimes it felt like they needed to invent something new that kind of broke the whole thing, and
Yep.
it's adding complexity to stuff that didn't
But
need any complexity, and it's
and
making the game worse, and maybe they need to breathe or something like that.
absolutely. But for sports games, the
Yeah.
way they build it very often is they have a full list of everything they could do, and the guys know.
Hmm.
Believe me, the developers, they know what they could do better in their game. Of course, they do. They have a
Yeah.
full list, features and improvements, and then what they do is they spread it out as long as possible. Not,
Hmm.
I mean, not them, but business. Business says we're going to take the list and we're going to put so that we don't do too much at the same time,
Yeah. Yeah.
because then we guarantee 10 years. We already have 10 years of ideas
Hmm.
with like just a minimal improvement once in a while, and then we're going to just keep milking the thing. And yeah, that's a sad part of it. And
Yeah.
there you go. Exactly.
Let me. We are a bit over the time, but
Yeah, yeah.
I have here one. I find it interesting question for indie game development with small marketing budget. What do you suggest to reach the best possible number in terms of user base? This is a tricky one because
Yeah,
it talks about the user base that we.
yeah. Well, I mean, so you got to go guerrilla,
Hmm.
right? So you got to build. I mean, what do you have? If you don't have the marketing budget, you don't have the TV
Yeah.
ads, and you don't have the poster on the LA Convention Center,
Hmm.
then you gotta, it's all the usual suspects. You gotta find influencers.
Oh, yeah.
That's a big part of it. I mean, nowadays, I personally don't understand it. Like, I'm old, but my daughter loves it. Whatever. No, no. But you know what I mean. Like, you need the influencers that fit. You need to look for the guys that will fit with your product, and they can be
Like Twitch
interested.
streamers and
Yeah,
stuff.
it's
Yeah.
streamers, content creators, I believe they
Hmm.
call it.
Yeah.
Although very often I don't know where the content is, but you need to find these guys. And then you need to do. I mean, some people use Kickstarter just to get visibility, and
Oh, yeah.
not necessarily for financing, but
Hmm.
because of the way you can map out the roadmap, it's easier to even get the information to people. And then
Yeah.
and then you use like
People feel involved, right?
that thing. They get involved,
Yeah.
they will share it, and then they will do some
Hmm.
of that. And then you need to organize, like, and it's harder now, but if you do like a multiplayer game or whatever, then you need to run around the conference. There's always a place for to bring a game, do a demo, have people play. You record that, people playing. So
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
so you build an aura of legitimacy,
Hmm.
because everyone has a game in their pocket, dorming on their computer, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But if you build it like this, it looks like it already exists. It looks legit, and
Hmm.
people go like, "Oh, they were at whatever PAX something, and they were at that place or that local thing," and you can see image. Oh, these people are having fun playing the actual. Oh, it's an actual game, and then it's linked to the Kickstarter. Oh, I could actually pledge, and oh, maybe I could get some more stuff done in the game, and then you have a Twitch guy on it. So you do this guerrilla
Yeah.
multi-channel approach, which
Hmm.
very often requires very little budget, and that's the way to go, really.
Yeah. Thanks, Alexis. I mean, we still have some questions, but
Yeah, I know.
unfortunately, I mean, you said that you would answer everything, so yeah.
Everything that I'm
Yeah.
asked, I answer.
Yeah, I tried to. Sorry, guys, if you posted a question, I tried to go to more diverse subjects to get a bit of everything. Alexis, as always, I mean, it was a great presentation. I really
Thank
love
you.
hearing you talking. Very interesting, very funny guy. Guys, don't forget that we have open positions at TLM. Go check them out. And once again, thanks everybody to join us. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, it was a real pleasure for me. Thanks, guys, and thanks for indulging me my rambling. I need that once in a while, even if it's not in person. So I'm really glad. Thanks a lot, and look us up.
Okay,
Yeah. Okay.
thank you. Goodbye, guys.
Have a good one.
Thanks a
Bye.
lot. Goodbye.